ready to go here. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody to my art talk, Journey to the Butterfly. I'm gonna have a slideshow and I'm gonna be talking to you a little bit about this exhibition, what a journey it has been for me and what a journey it can be for you in experiencing this show. So first off, I want to start out with acknowledging that Kimberley is within the Ktunaxa Amahikis, commonly referred to as the Ktunaxa territory, which is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa Nation. And I also want to honor the 4 nations on whose traditional land that I live and create and where all these stones came from. And that is in Revelstoke, the Sinixt, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Silks. And I also want to express deep gratitude to my generous teachers, Noreen E. Saddleback of the Samson Cree Nation and Elder Bart Thomas of the Splatson Band, guardian and knowledge keeper of the Secwepemc First Nations. It's through their teachings that I've learned to respectfully explore nature in my art, and for the arcane wisdom that she holds, their cultural perspective has been generously shared with me. So first off, I want to thank everybody for coming. I really appreciate that you took some time out of your day to check out my work and to hear what I have to say. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Columbia Kootenai Cultural Alliance, CBT, for grant funding not only to create the first leg of this project, but also for funding to travel here to Kimberley. I also received some Canada Council travel grant for the next show that I'm going to have here in Kimberley. So I just really want to honor those funding agencies. And I want to say thanks to Jordy, my partner standing behind the big stone there, who's been an amazing support system as I've done this journey and taught me so much and about just creating together and being such a great partner and support in everything I've done. I also, how did I get here? Well, this is a big thank you to Center 64. Honestly, it started 3 years ago with a very small prototype and a big dream of what a flipstone could be. While I was writing for grants, it was suggested that I request letters of interest, and I sent a request for a letter of interest to Center 64. And Christine Bassold at that time gave me an amazing reference letter, as well as offered me a show and said, it's 3 years from now, do you want to sign up? And I hadn't even started the Flipstones, and it was a powerful support and encouragement to make it happen. And I did get the major project grant with her assistance and support. So it's a big thank you to Center 64 that I'm here and that all of this work has been created. And I also want to say thank you to the amazing installation team. I was blessed to just drop all this stuff off and have them install it in this incredible way. So I want to thank you so much to the installation team who put in enormous time and energy to make this show look amazing. And I literally cried when I came in. It's so amazing to see it all together, and thank you so much. So who am I? Well, my name is Barbara May. I'm a multi and mixed media artist out of Revelstoke, BC. I studied art later in my life at the universities in Colorado of Colorado Springs and Denver, and then I transferred to complete my degree at the University of Calgary. I grew up in the prairies of Saskatchewan, so being in the mountains is always an adventure for me. I moved around North America, living in a lot of different places in Canada and the US, until I came through Radium and hugged my first giant cedar tree, and that was it. I knew I was home. I finally found home in BC, and I've lived in BC ever since. I'm a multi-genre, multimedia artist. I love playing with lots of different media. Obviously, soapstone and painting are my first loves, but I also do, I've done figural work, I've done portrait commission work, I've even done building portraits. And I love experimenting with different ways of approaching my media and approaching different media. And that actually has informed my teaching. I'm an art teacher. I've been teaching art since 2005. And because I explore a lot of media, I also teach a lot of media. My signature class is called Drawing More Than a Stickman. And it's a class because I believe that everyone can learn how to draw. And so in that class, the first things I teach is how to let go of the inner dialogue that tells you that you can't. And that changes a lot of lives into being willing to learn how to draw. My favorite and most close to my heart project that I was blessed to do was an Art Starts mural program. Through the Art Starts program, I got to do a mural with the elementary school in Nakusp. The entire elementary school came out and painted a mural with me, and that was probably the most proud project I've ever done. I do group lessons, private lessons. I've done them in my home. I've done them in other people's homes. I just love teaching art. It's my second favorite thing after creating art. And when COVID hit, I moved online and learned how to do it online too. So that's something that I've been working with as well. So teaching is my second love. People always ask, like, what inspires you? Well, my inspirations definitely come from nature, traveling, and cultural perspectives. So that's really the key. I'm very, very blessed to have been able to travel in a lot of different places in the world and to meet with and learn from many different cultural people who were so generous to teach me. Sitting by the drum in that picture is my elder Bart, teaching us how to drum on the grandmother drum on our property under our gazebo at home. So how did Journey to the Butterfly begin? Well, that began with this man, a mentorship. This man is named Mark McKay. He's a retired prospector and stone carver from Revelstoke. He's lived in Revelstoke most of his life, and part of the grant that I received from the CKCA was the major project grant, which included a piece where I mentorshiped with Mark, and he taught me how to prospect for Soapstone. And I've dedicated a whole section of the show to him, so this section over here is all about the mentorship that I had with Mark. So in that mentorship, he shared knowledge on elemental geology, which I knew nothing about. He taught me about the tectonics and how the Earth's crust moves, and how soapstone was a metamorphic rock and how it goes through a transformation to even exist. So without the metamorphic process, we wouldn't even have soapstone. And he taught me how to read aerial maps and how to harvest soapstone ethically with the permission of the land title owners, and how to do that. We took 7 trips out. We went to 37 different sites around Revelstoke looking for soapstone and soapstone veins, and we did find several. And we had so much in common that we became like really fast friends. If your eyes are open, it's a pretty good day. Mark was a really positive person, is a really positive person, and he always had these wonderful little sayings he would say over and over again when we went out on our different trips, and one of them was, if your eyes are open, it's a pretty good day. In the upper left picture, you can see that's a vein of soapstone right there. And you can see that we weren't the only ones visiting it with the bear paws that were right nearby. So we were up in the mountains. Some of our trips out were pretty sketchy areas, pretty high up in the mountains for this Saskatchewan flatlander. It was quite the adventure to go with this really amazing hardy gentleman out there. The mentorship had so many gifts. I learned so much about my media, soapstone. I learned that it was created through the metamorphosis. So soapstone has to go through a metamorphosis to exist. So it has to go through a process, something like a volcanic eruption or some great heat source like a meteor hitting the earth or something, and that forces the metamorphic rocks to melt and spin and turn and mix, and the minerals in the rocks during that heat process will color the stones, and then they reform into talc, and that is what soapstone is talc. And so soapstone has properties that can really handle a lot of heat. You've probably heard of soapstone countertops or soapstone at heat around like fireplaces and stuff, because it's an incredible heat conductor. because it goes through a metamorphic process. And that's why I started to understand that it was akin to the butterfly, because it literally has to dissolve and reform into a new form. And so that's where that connection comes from. We located several beautiful veins of soapstone, and I got to realize the dream that I had, which was to locate and harvest soapstone from the land and bring it back to the studio and carve it. So all of the stone in here was harvested from around Revelstoke. And it also gave me the opportunity to understand place. I got to learn a lot about my where we live, and I also got to learn a ton about my media that I was working with, because I'd already worked with soapstone, but to actually go to the land and harvest it and see where it formed and how it formed really changed my understanding of the media that I was working with. And I made a really cool friend with Mark along the way. I love this picture of him walking. He was very proud to have been in the Canadian military when he was younger, and he still had his military gear, so all his backpack and his binoculars were old school stuff that had been issued to him when he was in the military. And on the last day out, on the last trip out, we found this stone, which is not soapstone at all. It's just a slate type of rock, but it had this incredible watermark in it that had split the stone open, and it was a butterfly. And I mean, both Mark and I were just in goose pimples, because we've been talking about how soapstone is akin to the butterfly. And then we found this stone, and it just sort of sealed. The universe was like, yeah, you guys got it. And so that meant a lot to me to discover that stone together with Mark on our last trip out. And there was kind of a price that we paid for our mentorship as well. At the end of it, both Mark and I had significant health diagnoses. He was diagnosed with dementia, and I was diagnosed with cervical stenosis, which is a nerve pinching in my neck, and I'd lost the use of my right arm. So we had both sort of had to face something really big. And I remember when I took this picture of Mark when we were out there, I remember thinking, this could be the last time he ever gets out here, you know? This is such an important journey for he and I to be on, and he was giving me so much knowledge and wisdom, and that really was the last time he got to go to that place. But you know what Mark would always say is, that's just the nature of the beast. We didn't take it personal. We both just moved on and continued living our lives, and I just kept adapting and moving forward, and I went back to my teachings of Chaka Chikhodzi. Now, Chaka is a Zimbabwe-Canadian artist who lives in Peterborough, Ontario, and he was the person who taught me to stone carve directly after university. And he's from Zimbabwe, and he was wonderful in initiating the way that I carve. And he taught me the way of the Shona people of Zimbabwe, and it's to approach the stone with no intent and to co-create. And what that did for me is it burst my mind open with the perspective that maybe stone, even though we think of it as an inanimate object, maybe it has some kind of lived experience as well. And maybe it has some way it wants to express itself. And so that's what Chaka taught me when I worked with him. And you can see him with his beautiful carvings. He's a master. And it really did change the way I approached my media as well. He was the one who said, you gotta open up. So I started putting holes in my stones. He was like, open up. And I feel like the way that I create with the stones is more the stone's language. I feel like I'm working with the stone, and the stone is guiding me into expressing itself in a new form. And yeah, I'm very aware when I'm carving the stone how I'm chipping or bursting open energy that's been locked for millennia. So there's wisdom and energy in there that's been in that stone for a long time, and when I'm carving it, I'm sort of opening that up and freeing that out. And I'm really honored to be that tool for the stone. So, because I was having health issues and I was not going to give back my grant, and I was not going to give up this exhibition that I'd already landed. I just went with Mark's beautiful saying, "Keep it simple, stupid." And that's how I moved forward. I used all my tools. I had originally been just a mallet and chisel girl, and I started to really work with power tools. And Jordy was a big part of making sure I did that safely and learned how to do it in a good way. And I started working with all my tools, and I learned how to be patient with myself because I was having difficulty with the right arm. I started working ambidexterously. I just used my left arm, just started working that way, and managing to still pump out the stones and do the sanding. And you know, in the beginning, when you're first using your left hand, like if anyone was to use their non-dominant hand to eat a meal right now, you really notice the difference. But it's amazing how quickly the mind catches on. And I also just kept small. That's why this first series of paintings are all small paintings, because I was still just learning how to do things left-handed, and most of these paintings are mostly painted left-handed. And you can tell some of the first ones that I did are a lot thicker and blobbier. But I did progress into like kind of getting a technique and learned how to do ambidextrous work and just being, you know, taking it one day at a time and how much time I had in each day to be able to work on it. So if you look at the paintings over here, these are the memory paintings of the mentorship where Mark and I, these are the roads that we explored when we were looking for Soapstone. And I didn't want to idealize the paintings, so I kept in, you know, the cut blocks and the debris left from, and the places where you could see that there's a swath made for BC Hydro power lines. I wanted that to be part of those paintings because they truly are memories, and I didn't want to idealize what those roads were there for. I mean, if it weren't for those kinds of resource extraction, those roads wouldn't even have been there for me to find the soapstone. So I wanted that all to be part of the memories of those. And if you look on the roads themselves, the rocks are actually soapstone that's on the road parts of the paintings, soapstone from my studio. And after that first year, shockingly, I still ended up with a huge body of work just by taking it one day at a time. And I did have a lot of help with medical professionals and modalities like Reiki and stuff like that to help me through some of the beginnings of the struggles that I had. But yeah, just keeping it simple and doing it one day at a time and working small and just focusing, I was able to come up with the beginning of the series. And this is what the major project grant was funded. Okie dokie smoky, that was another one of Mark's awesome sayings. And he's still as he's been going further into his dementia, he still says okie dokie. He can still say that. Like, he can't speak very much anymore, but he still says okie dokie. And so he's still hanging on to that wonderful, playful sailing. So as I headed into the second year of creation and I was starting to get stronger and my body was getting better with the help that I was receiving, I was able to start going into a little bit larger stones and a little bit larger stones. And I wanted to shift my paintings from the memories of the mentorship into a study of the metamorphosis that rock goes through. Like, I really wanted to understand the stone's perspective of transformation. And so of course I started studying lava and the heat process that they go through. Now, interestingly, at the same time, that volcano went off in Iceland, and so I started following some artists that were videoing it, you know, using drones over it, and so I started really getting to study it as active volcano, and it was really interesting to look at that process, and it just made me realize like how intense this transformation is, and that there must be something to be learned from this kind of change. And it was interesting too that we were going through the time of COVID during this catastrophic change. So it helped me to think about, like, I saw some of my friends who were extroverts who really, really struggled during the time of COVID, not being able to go out, and just how difficult it was for them not to participate. I mean, for me, I was like in my studio, I was okay, but a lot of people weren't. And then we started losing friends, and Elder Bart lost his father to COVID, and it was really devastating because Harold was very important to me as well. So, you know, going through the change, and I was studying the lava and the stones change at the same time, and it helped me to somewhat understand and ease some of the difficulty and struggle of it, just to understand that there are bigger changes even than what we were going through. During that time, I had a lot of personal metamorphosis, and the stones taught me a lot of things. Because of the type of change that, the catastrophic change that soapstone goes through, it has healing properties like any gemstone. It has healing properties in it, and they're related to acceptance, adaptation, communication, openness, gratitude, allowing change. Those are the healing energies that are in the stones. And so what it helped me to understand during that time was that I needed to listen to my body, I needed to allow. I had to change my environment to assist me instead of me morphing my body to my environment. And I had to learn how to ask for help without shame. What a huge lesson there was in that, to ask for help. And then I started to really understand that changing my perspective to gratitude was the most important thing I could learn. Just being grateful for what I could do and not focusing on what I couldn't. And then it started to congeal my concept about interplay and about how I wanted people to be able to interact with the stones, and how one person interacts with the stones and changes the perspective of the stone will then change the perspective of the next person who sees the stone. And so that became this idea of an ongoing, interactive, constantly changing display. And that was interesting to me. So the molten experience of changing perspectives, and this is me introducing a flipstone to you. So this is a little video of one of my flipstones, which is on display here. So I wanted people to experience the molten experience of the stone. So I wanted, when I'm carving them, I pick them up and I'm flipping them around, and the intention is for you to reach in, touch the stone, and find a new balanced position for it to be in, and change the perspective of the stone. And it gives you the opportunity to not only find a new perspective in the stone, but it changes your perspective of the stone, and it also gets you to touch them and garner some of that incredible healing energy that they offer. And so that's kind of what the flipstones are about. They're an opportunity to experiment with changing your perspective and how that changes another person's perspective, that synergy, that interplay. And if you look closely at the stones, you'll see the striations, and all of the minerals that are present during that molten experience is what colors these stones. And so that's why they all look so different. It's because they're at different places in the vein. And it's really just all about perspectives in life. I mean, we all have our own perspective of how we see the world. There's different cultural perspectives. There's the perspective of nature. What does a tree see or feel when you walk by it? What does a stone experience during its transformation? And if you can think outside of your comfort zone as a new perspective, it opens your mind to seeing the world differently. And when you change your perspective, that changes another person's perspective that interacts with you. And that's what these flipstones are about. It's a place to practice changing perspectives and interplay. So you are invited to flip any stone that's called a flipstone in the center area there, and you're welcome to touch these stones to feel their energy. I feel like it's an opportunity to flip your perspective. So, yap-a-doo, diddly-doo, another one of Mark's great sayings. How do you express the other side of change when you come out from the chrysalis, when you can bring your arm over your head again, when the healing is happening and you're on the other side of the metamorphic process? Well, that's what the last series of my paintings are about. They're about that joy of release and moving forward. This is called the Emergence series, and again, along with the soapstone being on the roads, there's soapstone in the texture of the lava paintings and soapstone from my studio in the texture on the Emergence series. So the soapstone is in the paintings as well. And I feel like these are celebratory, what it would be like maybe for a butterfly to come out of a chrysalis and realize it can fly, or for a soapstone to go through a carving process and re-express itself as something shiny where people can see into it and touch it. So my painting process, like I said, I make my own texture paste using the soapstone materials from the studio. So some of it goes to powder, which is really powdery, and some of it is rubble. And I save that from the studio and mix it into a texture paste and build it up in layers on the painting, on the canvas. And a lot of my emergence series are inspired by the shapes of the stones that came forward during the carving process, and lots of layers of color. And in my stone carving process, it's basically, I go out and harvest stone like you see in the first picture, and then I use my power tools to shape it, come up with these loose shapes, and that's a little picture of the inside of my studio in process. And then the second part of the process is sanding. And sanding actually takes as long as it does to carve and shape, because I start out sanding to 150 grit and it ends up at 1200 grit. That's what gives it that huge shine. So I put a lot of elbow grease, and there's no power tools in my sanding process. It's a lot of time, but I love it, and it's how it gets so organic, and it's why you feel so drawn to touch it, is because it's been caressed a lot. And then the last part of the carving process is the finishing dance. It's the polish, and this is where the magic happens. So when I'm dealing with a small stone like this, I'll heat it in the oven, and then I put the polishing compound on it, and you can see that it just bursts the colors forward. That's when you see really what there is to see in the stone, what's been hiding and wants to be revealed. And it's just this is exactly how I was taught to do it from the Shona master that I worked with. And then for the larger stones, I kind of do it opposite. I use a torch and I heat the stone first, and then I put the polishing compound on it, or I put the polishing compound on it and then put the heat on it, and burn the heat pushes the polish into the stone and creates that pull forward. And it's a tedious little process again, and a lot of elbow grease. And then this is the buffing process, polishing it up. And I just buff it up, and that's what brings up that beautiful shine, and shows you everything the stone wants to reveal. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to find where I can get it to go. Where am I? There. Next slide. Okay, so that's the difference between it's sanded to 1200 grit, ready to be polished, and then what it looks like when it's polished. So it's like Christmas when I polish them up. Once that polish goes on, that's when I get to see what all the hard work was about. And this stone here, this one here that you're seeing at the front, is the biggest stone that I've ever done, and it's honestly, my opus to this point. With all of the physical challenges that I went through, to be able to get to a stone that big and create it so big has just been monumental for me. And I have a friend, an artist, who did this beautiful burl base for it, and I got to marry them, and I brought some of his burl bases here. They really accent, because they're together in the forest. They look beautiful together in person. This stone is called Lion, is short for lioness. And I'm not trying to say anything other than get you to think differently, to change your perspective on how we look at everything, and why we think that men come from women or women come from men. I just like to play with that idea. Just think about things, and why does it, change your perspective. That's really what my work is all about. So I'm pretty proud of this piece. Live in the moment, another one of Mark's simple sayings, not the first person to say it, but definitely poignant. I feel like I accomplished all of this in the last 3 years because I lived in the moment and did what I could in the moment, and tried to understand every piece of it, and I just live in such an abundant world. I have an abundant life, and this show is quite abundant, and I still can't believe I did this much in the last years. If there's anything I would add to Mark's saying, it would be live in the moment with gratitude. And gratitude is the attitude, it's the perspective that makes life so much more joyous and wonderful. There's my little dog up there. Okay, so back to the little butterfly stone. I just wanted you to know that I left that rock out there. I did not. As much as I wanted to, and Jordy was like, didn't you bring it home? I left it out there. So I want someone else to be able to find that beautiful that beautiful butterfly. Thank you so much for coming to my talk and listening to me. I hope you'll be willing to touch the stones and find their new balance. Take your time and enjoy. Thanks so much.